Hello, and a very warm welcome. It is a warm welcome to the latest edition of Talking Industry. My name is Andy Pye. I'm the consulting editor of a number of magazines at DFA Media Group, and we thank our media partner, Drives and Controls magazine, and their website, The Engineer's Choice for Automation in Manufacturing, without whom this would not be possible. Today, we're going to talk about robotics with a particular angle on getting robotics into the SME, small and medium enterprise community. Obviously, robotics and automation systems are increasingly crucial for manufacturers, significant opportunities to reduce cost, improve efficiency, and we'll go into all that. But we're aware as well that UK businesses have failed to capitalise on the opportunities presented by automation with robots. And we see SMEs as the area where this is most acute. Whilst this isn't exclusively for SMEs, that's going to be most of our focus. What's holding up the march of robotics? Is it lack of time, financial challenges, uncertainty on return on investment? Or perhaps you haven't yet hit the skill shortages and labour problems that make robotics much more attractive. Hopefully you'll get something useful out of this. And to help with that, you can use the chat to ask questions and comments. And we encourage you to do that throughout. Don't just wait to the end, because this is a discussion. And if you have some interesting points, we'll take those into the discussion at any time. So do use the chat. You can access it via probably three little buttons at the bottom, mark more, and then click on chat, and you can go from there. So ask your questions, make your comments, and if you have a useful document that you want to put in there, as long as it's not a commercial one, which we frown on, that's going to be helpful to us as well. So anything that contributes to the conversation is very welcome. And the three guys who are going to contribute most to this conversation, who you can see there, are excellent speakers on this subject. So we have two from industry. We have Michael Payne from KUKA, who's been working in robotic automation for over a decade, and he's responsible for business development in the FMCG and logistics sector. And I did look that up, and I found that it stands for fast moving, and I can't find it, so he'll have to tell me.
Fast moving consumer goods.
That's it. And yeah, so it covers a whole range of food and beverage, toiletries, cosmetics, lots of other things where things have to be moved through in a hurry. So thanks for getting me out of the hole there. Our other industrial speaker comes from Universal Robotics, a company that I've watched since they started, I think, in 2005. And Paul Roberts is their UK business development manager, and he helps companies of all sizes to embark on their automation journey. And our third speaker is Nikesh Mistry, who's appeared before once or twice. He's the sector head of industrial automation at Gambica, which is the trade association for instrumentation, control, automation and laboratory technology in the UK. He'll tell you how many thousand members he's got, but there's a very large number of them are SMEs in their own right, and so they're very much our target audience. And we know that all of our speakers are really keen to cover this issue of where we're going with labour shortages and skill shortages, and how robotics can help. So we thought we'd start there. And I'm going to ask Nikesh to give us a general overview of his perspective on that, and then move to Paul, who particularly wants to cover that area as well. So over to you, Nikesh.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andy, and welcome everybody. And thank you, Talking Industry, for having me today. And yeah, unfortunately, the members are not in the thousands, but they are in the hundreds for Gambica. So, you know, we do like to believe we represent quite a large amount of the industry in the industrial automation sector, particularly. And I think as an overview, you know, where we are at the moment is in the past few years, we've, encountered, our member companies have encountered a lot of rise in global competition, through economic changes, socio-economic changes, the pandemic, wars, obviously, rising labor costs, energy costs. And I think what has been, sort of a coming together of all different businesses of different sizes and industry is that idea that, automation and robotics can really be the answer to a lot of these problems that we're facing, whether it's directly a productivity boost they're seeking or an improvement in quality or consistency. But also, obviously, the reduction in costs and the add-on knock-on effects of sustainability and reducing your carbon footprint. So really and truly, there's so many different benefits that can come from these. And I think for SMEs, sometimes these technologies occasionally seem to be a bit out of reach. I think now more than ever, they're a bit more adaptable and accessible. And I think Michael and Paul will be able to talk to you a bit more about exactly how that is, later on. But Andy, I think you mentioned about the talent shortage. And I think that's something that I quite strongly believe in terms of automation and robotics being an attractive workforce where engineering might not have been seen to be before in the past. Working in robotics and automation for the younger generations is something that they find exciting and new and different. While we require quite a high level of skilled work in our field, I think these sorts of technologies actually create that opening for other generations to sort of help bridge that gap. I don't know, Paul, if you have anything to add to that as well.
Yeah, so within my role within UR, it's largely spent with end users who are looking to deploy automation and ways that they can do it. And the common overriding thing I hear from actually companies of all sizes, but particularly with SMEs, is that sort of labor gap and skill shortage. You can sometimes see that maybe in some areas the larger companies might be a little bit more protected and that they may be able to pay a little bit more to attract some staff, which then sucks up the skills from the SME pool, really. So yeah, we're starting to see now that the deployment of automation in general. Obviously, we supply a type of automation in collaborative robots, but automation in general for these SME companies now is moving away from being kind of a nice thing to have to being something that actually is an essential part of their business. It gives them the benefits of fixed costs. They know how much a robot's going to cost to run for the foreseeable future. Whereas obviously with the increase of wage costs, that's playing pressures again. So a lot of companies are paying more money for less skills of people coming through the door.
Unmuted. Do you think then things are getting better in terms of the realization of what automation and robotics can bring to the SME market, or is there still quite a lot of resistance?
It's getting better. It's definitely improving I've been with Universal Robots now for approaching 6 years. So, I've seen a big step change in that time. I think the development of more kind of off-the-shelf solutions, whether that be for something like welding or tending a CNC machine or end-of-line palletizing, having products off the shelf effectively for these solutions helps to kind of de-risk it and make it a lot more of a known quantity. So it's not always a case of starting with a complete blank sheet of paper with design work and everything. It's a lot more of a well-trodden path. We see lots of great innovation within the SMEs that we work with as well. Those that are actually, they see the challenges in front of them and roll up their sleeves and get stuck in. everybody's different, aren't they? So, you know, you get different levels of caution, and, you know, not everybody has a nice, easy application that you can see where we want to pick that box off this line and put it on that pallet over there.
So it's partly having off-the-shelf products ready, and it's partly working with individual partners to solve their own particular issue. Combination of the two. So, Michael, how do you see that? Because you're also very much involved in looking at a wide range of different companies who are into or looking to get into robotics.
We speak to all sorts of different companies that are sort of SMEs. We speak to some companies that have got 5 employees, and we speak to companies that have got 2,000 employees, and largely they all have the same issues, which predominantly is the lack of labour, but also the lack of skilled labour. And one thing that sort of jumped into my mind when Paul was talking about welding applications as an example is I can't count the amount of times I've been to a company and there's one guy that's been there for 30 years and he's the guy that knows how to weld this part up, and nobody else knows how to do it. So they need a robot to do that instead. And our advice is always is this really, is that yes, a robot may be able to do that, but it might be quite a complicated thing for a robot to do. They're not magical machines that can do everything. And we would encourage people to take staff and the skilled staff they do have, upskill them and train them and put them into these really technical applications, and then use robotics as a way to service that kind of lower skilled labor that people don't want to be doing, that might be boring, that you might have lower job retention, and really place the robots where they're best suited within those applications to use the skills that we have within this country and within this workforce in the most positive of ways.
So those highly skilled people will be delighted to know that they're not going to be replaced by a robot necessarily, but by a highly skilled individual who can be trained up and presumably can work together with this individual if it works out well, and work alongside one another for a while.
Exactly that, and there's many kind of examples of this. I went to a chocolate factory in the last kind of 2 or 3 months, and they said to me, "We've got this kind of technical application. The guy's got to do this, and we're struggling, and we, you know, this, that, and the other." And I looked at it and I said, "That's not a job for a robot. You want a skilled, a highly skilled employee to be doing that." On the end of his line, they had 6 or 7 people putting boxes onto pallets, pushing them around the warehouse. And I said, that's where the bang for your buck is. We've got lots of standard systems out there, like Paul said. You sort of plug and play systems, you can plonk them down straight away and really capture the skills and the personnel you have within your business and put them into the technical applications.
Yeah, that's true. We can, you know, you can get an inquiry or someone make contact with you wanting to solve a problem on the shop floor where they think, right, collaborative robots, that's a new technology. This can solve my problem. And, you know, quite often it can be done, but it would be a big project, very complex. But you can often see some processes on the shop floor where you could get a return within 3 to 6 months in some tasks where, you know, because it might not be a problem that's perceived at that time, but you've got skilled people who are actually too valuable to the company to be doing these dirty, dull or dangerous tasks, and actually they can add greater value to the company rather than doing those.
Let's jump forward to a question I was going to ask much later on, actually, but what would be the role of artificial intelligence to make these complex tasks more feasible by robotics than they have been to date? Oh, that's a lot of silence, so I'll throw it at Michael.
I'll jump in on that one then. So artificial intelligence, in my opinion, it's a term that's kind of bandied around way too frequently, and it's a little bit misunderstood. Probably a more applicable term for artificial intelligence within automation and particularly robotics is it's more thinking of it as machine learning. So the way that sort of the machine learns is that if it's got product that's coming down a conveyor belt and it tries to pick it and it fails, it might have a camera on there that looks at what shape that was, and it knows, oh, if it's that shape, I failed the last 2 times to pick up that shape. I need to try something else. So it will twist a little bit differently. It'll open its fingers a little bit wider and it will try a different approach. And eventually, after a bit of trial and error, the machine will say, this shape coming down the conveyor belt, I know if I do this, I can now pick it. And it's that kind of principle, whereas blind automation, including robotics and particularly special purpose machine, they're kind of set up to do one thing, and they're set up the way you program them. And if what's coming down the line doesn't meet the requirements of what you programmed it to do, it will fail in some way, or it could fail in some way. But with machine learning, that system has the ability to make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and then make itself better the longer it's installed.
Yeah,
so that doesn't really solve the problem of the complex welder, does it? I mean, that probably is a step too far, is what you're saying.
Not necessarily. I mean, with the complex welder, you could perhaps not employ machine learning per se, but some very clever kind of algorithms to look at the shape and scan in a 3D form what it is it's attempting to weld. And then it can calculate itself what the path it needs to do is. But that's clever software and clever programming, not necessarily artificial intelligence. It's not thinking, it's just working out based on a set of parameters. There's a post here and there's a post here, so I need to go through the middle.
And that sort of development process would take quite a long time and be quite costly to set up, or not?
It can be, but again, with speaking about the welding application specifically, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If it's a product that you're making quite a lot of, so you're doing sort of batch runs of 50, 100 units, then you program that once. It might take you half a day to set up, but then every day you want to weld that thing again, you just push a button and it does it within reason, assuming it's been set up right and the correct parts are in there and the welder's full of wire and all those kind of things. The robot itself can repeat what it's been taught the first time. If every single job you're doing is different, the balance of setup time to production run is slightly different. However, I've seen a number of applications that are still way more time effective, even at sort of batch one production, setting up the welds and then hitting go to actually do the slow movements, whereas you're just showing at the beginning and the end, beginning, end, off you go.
I know you're desperate to get in, Nikesh, so I'm going to ask Paul for his comments first and then come back to you, if that's okay.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. So as Michael said, you know, if AI can be attached to anything at the moment, it can, can't it? And you know, it's obviously is going to grow, and as we say, from a machine learning perspective on how it adapts to things that are presented to it. But you know, probably where we're at now, and particularly with the focus of this being on SMEs, then it's probably not a first step that someone would be taking into automation to be having an all singing, all dancing AI solution within the company, because what you're often looking, if it's at that first step that they're taking, is it's trying to make it as small and as manageable as possible, so that the company is thinking, well, how can we not make money from this, rather than like, oh, are we going to get our return on this? So it's kind of defining that minimum viable sell, if you like, so that they can crack on with it, get it in, get it earning, and then actually more complexity can be added at a later date. It doesn't all have to be done on day one. Yeah, I think for SMEs, that's a lot of what we're doing, is kind of you know, sometimes pulling companies back a little bit and saying, look, let's focus on this area first. And with welding, you know, the quality of the parts that are presented to the robot are crucial. So, you know, if you present rubbish to a robot, then that's not a task for a robot, really, you know.
So get in the door with a simple application and work from there, really, and show that works, and that will lead to hopefully other opportunities as well.
Yeah, there's quite a cool book from a company called Robotics. They do like grippers and such like, and it's a book called Lean Robotics, and it kind of talks about sort of how an SME would go about deploying robots within their company. and applying lean methods of manufacturing, something that that most of the people on the call will be familiar with. And that's really quite a cool resource, just to, you know, think about how you would sort of deploy a cell within the company.
Okay, Nikesh, I did promise that I would come back to you as you're champing at the bit. The questions are beginning to flow in as well.
Sure,
So,
yeah, no, I mean, I think let the questions come. It's probably better to direct them, you know, directly answer the audience questions. But I mean, I completely agree with both Michael and Paul there. I think a lot of the time the discussions that our members are having is that, you know, whether it is a robot or another form of automation, you know, the idea is it comes down to that corporate culture, understanding, you know, what the business problem is, and, you know, solving it for the problem that it's trying to solve, not just automation for automation's sake. And, you know, you see the name AI or you see the word robot and you think, okay, we have to use that. Once you understand, like what Michael said, where it's actually, you know, AI is just a developed version of machine learning, then, you know, once you start understanding that these machines have been doing that for many, many years, and it's something that is more of a buzzword and a modern technology using the analyzed data based off machine learning. I think once those concepts and basic principles have been understood, then, you know, I think the adoption will start to take off a lot faster.
you mentioned the term corporate culture, which I rather liked. In SMEs, there must be a huge variation of corporate cultures. You know, I'm thinking of the guy who runs everything from, you know, then you've got people who have a million hats because there aren't enough people, and, you know, SMEs must be, they come in all shapes, sizes and colors, don't they? So what do you experience when you go into company and look at the different corporate cultures in SMEs?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You know, like you said, sometimes someone will be wearing multiple hats because they don't have, you know, the people power to be able to do different tasks, and so they often do multiple different things themselves. And I think often with, you know, new equipment or changing the way that the company has already been functioning, it often can be difficult to get, you know, the leadership in those companies to actually approve it or agree to it, because, you know, there's always that culture of if it's not broken, why fix it? Which is, you know, is a big hindrance to adopting digital technologies and robotics and automation. And, you know, it's not always the right way either. It's not the right mentality to have when, you know, once those returns on investments are realized, or, you know, the actual efficiency improvement or productivity is realized, I think their corporate culture starts to change. I think, yeah, I used that word because it can be sometimes the person on the shop floor is really the one who benefits from an improvement in the technologies, but they're not the ones who always sign the paperwork at the end of the day. You know, they're not the ones who agree to the investment. So there's that gap sometimes. And, you know, I think actually, ironically, in smaller companies, the gap is closer rather than in the multinational companies. You know, the gap is actually more visible. So it's very interesting when there is that reluctance to invest when it is a smaller company.
You can see.
What's your experience, Paul? I mean, yeah, it's an interesting area, isn't it? I mean, you know, that it's often said, for example, that Brits are very proud of how long they can keep machinery running, and you know, other nations maybe are proud of how modern their equipment and machinery is. So, what are your experiences?
Well, I think, you know, if you look at, you know, I suppose within Europe, Germany's kind of the benchmark for the deployment of automation, and you know, it's kind of like the old cliche of robots taking jobs isn't something that I see. Quite often they're doing the jobs that people aren't there available to do. But you know, we do have a productivity issue in that how much each person within the UK is producing. We are behind other countries. It's a fact. So, you know, by enabling more automation, enables that greater productivity from the same working base within an organization. You know, companies go about it engaging in that different ways. I go into companies, I have branded Universal Robots clothing. It's quite often it'd be like, oh, don't wear any branded clothing, and you're sort of smuggled in through the back door at times to look at processes. And, but actually the best way about going about it is to actually engage with the factory floor and say, look, we know you're working hard. We're looking to make your jobs easier and better, because actually a lot of the best ideas come off the factory floor.
Yes.
I think it's no different. Robotics isn't any different to any other type of automation equipment, really. I think the barrier is that it resembles a piece of us. It resembles our arm quite often, and but it's no different to a CNC lathe or whatever it might be. It's a piece of equipment to be more productive.
Interesting point. Michael, what's your take on corporate culture?
Yeah, firstly, I have to agree with Paul that there is this kind of idea that robots are something special, but to me and most of the people in the industry, there is no difference between a robot and a CNC lathe, etc. It's just a piece of equipment you're given to your workforce to help them be more efficient. And like Paul said, we do have a major productivity issue in this country, in that we're about 20% less than our counterparts in Europe. So if France takes 4 days to make something, we'll take 5. And these are the tools that we need to give people and allow our staff to have to make them more productive for the business. But also, yes, back to what Nikesh was saying, is a lot of the time, the people that we're speaking to are the engineers or people running the production lines, or maybe even the people working the production lines. And they speak to us and we tell them about these tools we can give them, the robotic systems, and they're chomping at the bit to have these systems on their shop floor. And the first thing I do normally is tell them, my job is to help you sell this idea to your boss. So he's going to ask you all sorts of questions, or she might going to ask you all sorts of questions about why should we do this, and we need to stop thinking about, right, we're going to reduce this amount of headcount, or it's going to be this amount of labor, because there's so many benefits to robotics. You can have, obviously, it can reduce labor, not always, but you can produce your product more accurately. You can allow for areas of traceability. So if ever there's a problem way down the line, once it's shipped out, you can track it back to the date, time, and person that had done a particular thing on it. You can increase your productivity. So I saw a factory that introduced robots. They went down from a 3-shift pattern to a 2-shift pattern. So instantly reducing their cost of production by 33% by installing this machinery. You can have less waste. So you're wasting less material coming in. So the cost of manufacturing stuff is getting cheaper. And then sort of one of the last ones that's often overlooked is the company image. So particularly in the area that I work within FMCG, a lot of the end, it's often sort of B2B business going through supermarkets quite often. And if a supermarket is looking to you to be a supplier to them, and they've got a warehouse with a load of people making sandwiches by hand and doing this, that, and the other, versus a highly automated warehouse that's got all this technology, it's really reliable. If we have another COVID, it's not going to stop. That's the more attractive one for the supermarket to invest in and say, yes, you're our supplier. So they could actually benefit from additional orders and additional business from just this image that the company's giving up.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that if you generate more wealth, then that's got to be good for the country, because there's more wealth means more money available. But I suppose it's a political issue as to how that money gets distributed amongst the population, which is quite a current aspect of where we sit at the moment, a week away from a general election. And I was wondering how to sneak this one in, but I've got a question here from Darren. Do you think a change in government will supercharge investment in the UK manufacturing sector, including SMEs? Or maybe it's slightly rephrased that, and what would you like to see from a new government for the benefit of manufacturing sector, SMEs, and obviously robotics and automation? I know Nikesh is quite prominent in lobbying government, so we'll take him last. Paul, what do you think? What would you like to see in terms of the next year of what we assume will be a new government?
Yeah, well, we'll have to watch this space, won't we, for what happens next Thursday. But yeah, I think what most companies are wanting is obviously a little bit of confidence, really, and whether that be in a stable low interest rate, so they feel that they're prepared to invest. So yeah, I think also some help with capital expenditure from a tax perspective, obviously always helps. So, but I think on top of that, I noticed, and I said to my partner the other day, there's been very little. I've not really noticed any talk from anybody about manufacturing over the last few weeks. And the fact of it is that as every pound spent in manufacturing hits pretty hard in the economy, and that typically the jobs that are within manufacturing are higher paid, and it just needs to be just being talked about a bit more would help, really, and actually promote UK manufacturing.
Yeah, Michael, what's your perspective? KUKA it's not German owned anymore, is it? It's multinational.
It's multinational. It's still German run, and it's still very Germanic.
Yeah,
yeah.
Do you get to see the different industrial strategies in different countries that
not so
the
much. I
company
mean,
works
we see different attitudes in different countries towards investment in robotics and automation. The UK, as probably most of the people on this call already know, we're something like 25th in terms of robot density. So we're really far behind in terms of investment in these robotics. And really, it's amazing that we're still one of the world's largest economies, because we're not investing into manufacturing. And manufacturing is the third largest contributor to our local economy. So why it's not on the agenda for people to be talking about at a political level, I've got no idea. What I would say is that I completely agree with Paul that tax benefits for investment into automation and machinery would be very beneficial. However, we did have the super tax thing. Somebody help me out. What was it called? The
Graduation, was it?
Was it the
It was super deduction tax.
Yeah, that one. We had that a few years ago, and I think that was a very good idea. But I think it was very badly timed. The pain for the industry was just turning on, and then they introduced the super incentive, and then they expected people to jump to automation straight away. And probably, as many people on this call know, the gestation period for an automation project is quite long. We could be talking to a company for 1, 2, 3 years. By the time they're really convinced and they've been going through those pains and they're really ready to invest, the super tax was gone. So if they were to bring something back now, the company manufacturing is certainly in a pain point position. I think it would be taken up a lot more readily.
Interesting. Well, Nikesh, you're in a position to do a fair bit of lobbying. What will you be lobbying for, and when?
Yeah, well, I mean, we started quite a few months ago, actually. I mean, I think Michael said it quite rightly, in the sense that the previous funding opportunities, they were good, and they had the right idea behind them, but they weren't advertised well enough, and they weren't utilized enough because manufacturers weren't in a position at the time to use them. So, I mean, from a Gambica perspective, we started quite a few months ago, back when we were suspecting an election this year, before it was announced, where we built our Gambica manifesto, which is a document on behalf of all of our member companies, and we had a few workshop sessions with members to get their opinions and build a manifesto based on the voice of the sector, if you like. And one of the things, obviously, we've asked of government, and it has been sent and acknowledged by the political parties, and that's for a long-term industrial strategy, which you mentioned yourself, Andy. In the UK, we have not had an industrial strategy in many years now. It was a long time running since we've had a proper industrial strategy. And for manufacturers, that really would be the talking point for, you know, what they can implement. And within that strategy, you know, we'd like to see a lot of funding routes, funding opportunities, you know, workforce development, you know, building the skills, the big gap in the skills market that we've seen, and then also, you know, alignment with Europe is one of the most important things for the regulatory side of things. You know, in terms of compliance and regulatory requirements, you know, one of the things we would really need to see is the alignment with Europe in all different areas along the compliance side. So that's something else that should be incorporated within the industrial strategy. So I think there's lots of different areas. And to answer Darren's question, you know, whether it's a change in government or a same government or which government can come in, I don't know, and I don't think it matters for the UK manufacturing sector, in the sense that all we ask for is that strategy, and whichever government does come into play, that's what we will be, you know, pushing for and continuing to lobby for.
I know in the past you have worked with other associations like the Machine Tool Association in producing, you know, policy documents. I won't explain which one, but is that something you're likely to do again?
Well, I think one of the things that we've seen with this upcoming election is most associations have produced their own manifesto, which we've read, which they've read ours, I'm sure, I'm hoping. And, you know, I think we all made sure that, again, we were in agreement and not, you know, not stepping on anybody's toes or asking for different things. But instead of putting everyone's one voice in one document, it's better coming from a spread background, because we all have different members, different size members. Some have individual members, some have company size members. So, you know, to get that voice of industry, you know, including the Make UK voice as well, you know, which sits above us all. So we kind of have a collaborated response to that. So no, we haven't had a document like the one you mentioned, but there are other areas that, you know, to put forward to the government and make our voice heard, at least.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing that. While I remember, it would be great if you could put a link into the chat to your report, Nikesh. I think that would be very useful for everyone. And also, Paul, you mentioned a French company that makes. If you can just drop their name or a contact into the chat, that would be really useful as well. Two clear takeaways, I think, there. Okay, well, before we go on to Michael's piece, we'll take a question from Lloyd Arnold, which is a very general one, which actually makes it more difficult in many ways, I think. Given the advancements in robotic automation, what are the most significant technological innovations currently available that can specifically address the challenges faced by SMEs in terms of cost, ease of integration, and flexibility? It's pretty horrible, isn't it? Anything that I often ask a question, you know, at the end, which is, you know, where do you think we'll be in 5 years' time type question. It's a bit like that. It's so open-ended. But is there something screaming out at you guys that you think might really be significant, or might be significant in 5 years or whatever?
So what I was going to say is that specifically focusing on the last section of that question, which was addressing the challenges faced by SMEs. We've all talked about the labour being sort of one of the largest challenges at the moment. With that in mind, I'd ask you to consider and sort of picture in your mind a typical production line. So you've got stuff coming off a lorry. That stuff comes off a lorry, gets moved to a production line, gets inputted into some sort of system. That system then manipulates it, makes it, does something to it to make it more valuable. Then it's normally packed into a box, put onto a pallet, and then put into a lorry. So if you think about that in your mind, taking stuff directly out of a lorry can be done with automation. It's very difficult, probably not one of the easy ones to start with for an SME. Moving that product to a production line, we have AMRs, really easy to implicate, really good bang for your buck. That's a great technology for an SME. Then you can have something to input it to the line. That's like a depalletizer or something of that kind of ilk. That's normally quite a simple established technology, which is very low risk. Then you've got your mid-production, which is going to be very unique to your business. So it's going to be a machine or a system that's designed specifically to make your product. That's normally going to be bespoke, and it's normally going to be slightly more complicated, slightly more expensive. Well worth doing, but maybe not your first starting point for an SME. Then when you get towards the end of the line, you're putting that stuff in a box. When you're putting it in a box, doesn't matter what you're putting in a box or what shape the box is, they're all kind of similar. So again, very advanced technologies, very low risk, established, almost an off-the-shelf product. So big win for that one. Once it's in the box, you're putting it on a pallet. Palletization is probably the easiest starting point for any company that's looking for robotics. You can rent palletizers, you can lease palletizers, you can buy palletizers, and essentially you're putting stuff on a box. It doesn't matter if a robot's doing it or a human's doing it. It's a simple application. And then from there, very similar to the start of the process, once it's on the pallet, you've got AMRs again that can drive it off into the distance. And that, again, is an easy technology. So that's the way I always think about it. Your easy bits and your hard bits. Focus on the easy bits first. Once you've got them nailed, tackle the hard bits.
So you can break down a production line into modules, and some of them are easily manageable. Some of them require great degree of investment. And bizarrely, what you're probably saying is that the areas that require the most innovation are probably not the place to start.
Not always, not always.
If I could praise you, Paul, does that fit in with your view, or do you see something else screaming out?
Yeah, it is very, very similar, and certainly as you start getting towards the end of a line, you start typically having a lot more order, which naturally makes it easier for you to add automation into the process. There was a question with regards to the sort of the technological advancements helping SMEs as well, was there, that we were touching on then too? All right, yeah. So, I think from our perspective, we supply hardware, but we're very much a software company as well. And what you're starting to see within the space is, the developments of the software that's going with the automation equipment to aid flexibility, whether that be that you're a contract packer and you have a fast changeover of pallet layout, so you need to adapt quickly offline to get those into the automation equipment, or maybe someone who's wanting to run a robot across, maybe one robot across several CNC machines. So you have that kind of that flexibility in the software that enables that quicker deployment, and ultimately, if it's working, it's earning for the company.
Nikesh, do you have any views on what technological innovations would be best?
I mean, I think best is a question for the SME themselves. I think each SME has a different problem to solve, and I think it is about addressing that business problem and reverse engineering it from there. I think I mentioned it before, not just putting technologies in, just to solve all issues. You've got to pick your problem that you want to address directly. And I mean, in terms of the actual technologies, there is a lot out there. From sensors and safety to digital twins and predictive and preventative maintenance. There's all different types of technologies alongside robotics, and obviously as Gambica, we're very strong supporters of the variable speed drives, soft starters market, and the technologies that actually help you with your sustainability route. So I think the modern world that we live in has a heavy focus on climate change. It's become a lot more prominent, and tackling your automation problems through climate change solutions such as drives, control gear, switch gear, soft starters, and technologies like that actually have one, productivity and benefits to your costs and energy costs, but also your own carbon footprint. So I think technologies like those are also ones not to forget about.
A very good point, and I suppose that the variable speed drive has in common with robotics that the take up has been nowhere near as high as it should have been, really, to maximise the benefits. So yes. We have had a couple more questions in, but I'm going to park them for the time being. One is about economics, the other one about the safety issues, which we will touch on because of the belief about collaborative robots and safety. So I do want you both to have an opportunity to talk about that. Michael, can we move on to, you wanted to talk about the successes you're having in food and beverage, and how well that sector is doing, and what lessons we can learn from that, perhaps to take into other sectors which could benefit.
Definitely. So just to sort of paint a bit of a picture. So we mentioned earlier that manufacturing is the third largest driver of the UK economy, and within that, 20% of it is food and beverage. So it's really big for the UK to be investing in these kind of technologies. And amongst all the doom and gloom of we should do this and we should do that we've been talking about, there is actually a quiet success story happening in the background, which is automation in food and beverage. And we've got a very good set of data in the UK. We've got BARA statistics that tell us exactly what robots are being purchased every year, what applications they're going into. And if you look at the data back in 2017, we've had about a 300% increase to the last set of data, which was the back end of last year, specifically in robots going into food and beverage. Now, there's no clear reason why that is, but we can all draw our own conclusions. My personal belief is that it's the pain caused by the lack of transient labour that's coming over from predominantly Eastern European countries, sort of post-Brexit stuff. And that's really forced the industry to find another solution. They can't just get a busload of people in to come and do this process. They have to invest in something or they close down. There's no other choice for them now. So really, I'm thinking with those sort of success stories in those areas, what are people's thoughts on how we can encourage other industries to sort of learn from that experience and start investing in robotics to become as robust as our food and beverage industry now is?
Yes, that's certainly interesting. Can you pick up which areas might have those similarities that they could benefit in the same way?
Certainly from my perspective, I was talking earlier about the production line and the different potential points to implement automation. It would seem the food and beverage industry is doing, as I suggested, moving the labor into the complicated middle tasks and deploying robotics and automation into the packing, palletizing, and then distribution around the warehouses. And because of that, if a company comes to me and says, I need to put something on a pallet, I can say, right, I can take it to 50 other countries and show you somebody that's already doing that, and they can tell you about how successful it's been for them. But this seems to be this growth seems to be fairly unique to the food and beverage industry, and I can't fully understand why that is, because we have the same pain points in other industries. We've got the same lack of labor. We've got the same issue. So a lot of products need putting in boxes and then putting on pallets. Yet this one industry seems to be absolutely skyrocketing off, whereas everything else is kind of petering along quietly.
I mean, the first one that would come to mind would be pharmaceutical, wouldn't it? I mean, that seems to have a lot of very similar characteristics, but perhaps for some reason it's not developing to the same degree.
Pharmaceutical, it's a strong industry for the UK for automation, especially sort of fixed and hard automation. Robotic wise, it kind of is plodding along at the same kind of growth every year, or lack of growth every year, in the same kind of robot numbers. But yeah, predominantly you would imagine, particularly in other FMCG areas like your home care, personal products, they still face the same challenges of the food and beverage industry in that there is a lack of transient labour. Yet we're seeing no increase in that market at the moment.
That's very strange, isn't it? Because you would think it was geared up. I mean, particularly the personalisation aspect of medicines, you know, which robotics gives you, automation generally gives you such a big opportunity to work in batches of one, doesn't it? And you know, everybody can have their own specific set of pills packaged for them, and you would think it would be a real winner.
And it might be, I'm not an expert in the area of pharmaceuticals, but it might be that the manufacturing processes for pharmaceutical products are much more highly regulated, and therefore the development of technologies, proving these technologies, traceability, all that kind of thing, might be a bit of a curveball in terms of development of those systems. We've certainly heard a lot of talk in the industry about these kind of things being developed, but yet not a mass uptake.
Yeah,
on the
with
food and
likes of
beverage
pharma,
side, after you.
with the likes of pharma, there's always sort of a delay just because of the amount of validation and stuff that needs to go into it.
I wondered if is time criticality relevant in food and beverage? You know, can you get things through the door quicker by being automated? I mean, because we are getting allegedly some delays in being able to export food.
Yeah, certainly within food and bev, you do have the time criticality of it. The product does spoil; it has to come in, it has to go out. We had before sort of the beginning of COVID, around early 2020, I think it was. We had this horrible situation where we were actually producing more animals than we had labor to slaughter and butcher them, and these animals were being grown and going to waste, and that in itself is a tragedy, really. Unfortunately, butchery of animals is one of these very complicated areas that's having a lot of development going into at the moment. But there are areas within that kind of supply chain, like I said, the front end and the back end, which are very easy to automate. And it's there where these food and beverage companies are now putting the labor. And it does mean that now that labor is going back into the middle bit where it's desperately needed.
Nikesh, what do you see in terms of sectors that are developing faster than others, and why?
So, I mean, actually, ironically, as a trade association in automation, we don't tend to talk too much granularity about individual sectors because it does sometimes breach competition law. But I mean, in general, yeah, we do talk about how there has been, increases in certain areas, energy saving products, for example, and then also, areas, and that's across the board in all industry sectors. So we talk more top level, spread across the board. So less granular breakdowns. But I mean, as far as general knowledge goes, I think automotive, pharmaceutical, and food and bev in the UK have always been quite prominent. In terms of taking up a large part of the actual economic output. So I think those, it's quite interesting to hear what Michael and Paul were saying about what their findings are, working within those industries.
Okay, anybody want to add anything more on that area, or shall we move on?
Well, I think,
That's good.
lots of growth areas that we see are in things like the machining and fabrication industry. Again, a lot driven by the skills gap, aging workforce. So we get lots of companies where, the average age on the shop floor may be in their mid to late 50s. So it's a challenge now losing people, and it's only going to get greater. So yeah, it just the thing that automation gives you as well, when you talked about sort of getting product out the door effectively, is that it does give you that known quantity of what it can deliver for a company. So if you set something up on a machine to run a night shift for you, you're going to come back to X amount of parts ready for the morning.
Yeah. Okay, well let's move on to the well-rehearsed subject of safety with collaborative robots. There is a question in the chat which says, I think IO-linked safety will be a significant technology advancement, so we can perhaps take that as part of this answer. Collaborative robots, do they have an undeserved reputation for being potentially dangerous in the vicinity of human beings? Paul?
It depends what you're doing with it. in a nutshell, you could have a collaborative robot. Like our robots have 17 different Category 3 performance level D, certified safety functions. You could put a collaborative gripper on the end of it, but ultimately, if you're picking up a scalpel with that gripper, then it really does come down to the application as a whole of what you're looking to do with it. I think what you do also see as well is areas where the market is skewed quite a lot. In that when I first joined Universal Robots, a large percentage of our robots were being deployed in these collaborative applications, maybe something working in an assembly task along with a person. But now what you're starting to see is, because they like ease of use and other features within our robots, that actually they're in quite a lot of industrial applications because they could deliver additional benefits for the customer. So it really has kind of skewed in that time that I've been with the company. It's really changed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Michael,
I think
what's
it's
your
really interesting. Sorry, I was just gonna jump in there with what Paul was saying.
yeah.
I think it's something that we've discussed quite a lot often in terms of safety and trying to make, whether it's cobots or other equipment. And there was a quote I came across some years ago where it's a common mistake that people make when trying to design something completely foolproof, but they end up underestimating the ingenuity of complete fools, because you can't actually take the fool out of themselves, and they're always going to find a way to get around it. So it's about doing the best you possibly can. So yeah, that was
Michael, what's your view?
Okay, so I suppose I should give a bit of a caveat that our company produces both collaborative robots and industrial robots. So I am fairly non-biased to this. I would say, in my personal opinion, the majority of applications that we see aren't truly collaborative in the sense of needing to collaborate with a robot. They are sometimes what we would refer to as cohabitive. So the customer doesn't want to take up space with guarding. They want the human and the robot to share a space together, and that's much more typical to the type of applications we see. But Paul's quite right with what he says in terms of the safety of the cobot is completely dependent on what you're doing with it. A lot of people we speak to sometimes assume that everything's safe because the robot's a collaborative robot, and quite rightly so. If it's got a scalpel on the end of it, it's not safe anymore. It's not collaborative, and you do have to put it behind guards. What's sometimes a little frustrating for me is you go into some factories and you see a whole row of collaborative robots, and you think, oh, they're nice and shiny, like them, and then they've been put behind guards, and you think, well, actually, you could have had industrial robots that work twice as quick and lift twice as much and are half the price. So it's sometimes frustrating in that sense that you take these wonderful collaborative robots and then you guard them anyway. I think collaborative robots do have their place, and I think that they're very wanted in the industry. I think it's definitely a market pull rather than a technology push, and the market seems to love collaboratives, and that's why we will continue to make both collaboratives and industrials to service both markets.
So, Paul, if you had to sell a collaborative robot in 3 sentences, how would you go about it?
It ultimately depends on when you're actually speaking to a customer as to what their drivers are for the automation. Is it the fact that they need something lightweight that they can move around? Is it something that they want to be able to take ownership of the technology within the company? Lots of different factors that we've kind of got a whole board of sort of USPs that we might have in the market space, and you pull on different ones for different companies. A lot of the time it's coming down for floor space. It's coming down to return on investment. So whilst a robot in a box versus an industrial robot might be more expensive on a collaborative, it would be. By the time you've put a lot of the other infrastructure around it, it can work out. Obviously, solution perspective can be more. So it really does always depend on the end user and what they're gonna do with them. We do actually have them handling scalpels as well, as a matter of fact. But yeah, they are not working collaboratively.
And the other side of it is there's been quite development in what loads collaborative robots can handle, isn't there?
Correct. Yeah. So you've sort of seen a little bit of an arms race, if you like, between some of the cobot manufacturers in the payloads that they can handle. And again, if you were looking at something like a palletizing application is a perfect example of that, in that, you know, what you're kind of considering when you're looking at an application like that is obviously the speeds and the loads that it's actually carrying, but also where's it passing them through. So are you only palletizing up to 1 meter high? Or are you palletizing up to 2 meters high, where you're passing through the head zone? So there's all these different factors that need to be taken into account when deploying an application with a company.
If we have somebody in the chat who was considering moving his SME business from manual labor to robotics, where should he go for seeing the best case studies and the best advice? Apart from you guys, of course.
Well, I use YouTube every day, a lot of the time. Yeah, I use YouTube as a resource for, you know, it's amazing when you see the amount of applications that are being deployed. You know, you see kind of like the glitzy corporate videos that will be on ourselves and KUKA's channels, but also just sometimes what an engineer's taken a video of and posted themselves. You can sometimes see the quite cool maybe in feed and out feed that they've done on an application. So yeah, there's loads of stuff on YouTube for sure.
Excellent idea. What about you, Michael? What would you?
I would agree. I'm also a great fan of YouTube. I go on there to look at all sorts of different robotic applications if it's not one I've seen myself. But the major advice I give to anyone is to speak to a robot manufacturer, somebody like ourselves or Paul or one of the other manufacturers, and really get a good kind of understanding for who their system partners are and which companies in the UK have done applications similar to theirs in the past. We are in a slight situation in the UK where we do have a lot of up and coming and inspiring sort of robot integrators that maybe don't have the experience that they need. And I have seen a number of occasions where companies have gone out, found their own sort of companies to install these robots, and they don't always deliver exactly what they should. What we're very proud of at KUKA is our partnership program, and we kind of vet and validate our integrators on their experience in certain applications. So if you want that palletizer, I know some companies that would be really good at palletizing. But if you want to go and cut up an apple, that wouldn't be the right company. We've got a different set of companies that kind of specialize in those kind of applications. So yeah, that would be my advice, really. Speak to a robotics manufacturer or an industry expert that can vouch for the company that's potentially going to be doing your integration.
So it's a systems integrator, a bit like a machine builder with particular expertise for robotics that you should perhaps look at, and that you're taking care of the education side. What do we need to teach younger people about robots, if anything, or do they just accept them?
Depends what you define by younger.
Well, indeed, yeah. Well, everyone's younger than I am. But let's say people leaving school, or you know, looking for jobs in manufacturing. What do they need to know about robotics and how attractive it could be to program them and to work with them, as opposed to what they probably may perceive as being a dirty engineering job?
Well, I think that's it, Andy. I think you know it's the perception of what it means to work with robots, and I think, you know, we need to start at as younger age as possible. You know, I'm a STEM ambassador at Gambica. We also have our Young Council, which is a group of individuals from member companies who are all STEM ambassadors as well, and we've all become quite passionate about going into, you know, main primary schools, also secondary schools is important, but, you know, it's that education piece to teach them that, you know, getting involved in robotics and engineering is no longer that stigma of, you know, hard hat under a bus, getting oily all day long. While that is still an opportunity if you want it, there's also, you know, a lot of other areas that you can work in within robotics and automation that is so much more attractive to the younger generations. I think it's about showing them and demonstrating to the younger generations that, you know, this is what's out there. You know, events like the Big Bang Fair and other sort of exhibitions, which, you know, we don't do as much in the UK, but I know Germany does a lot of inviting schools along to see what is out there in engineering. And I think, you know, it's that informing the younger generation that, you know, they require data analysts, they require programmers, you know, showing them how to program a robot is something quite exciting. So I think there's an area of showing that engineering can be cool to them, if you like.
Is that something that your companies get involved in terms of teaching younger people about engineering? Is that passion of yours as well?
It is, yeah, absolutely. And you know what's actually quite good to see is the adoption of our type of technology and robotics in that sort of sixth form college level at the moment in the UK. You know, sort of the use of robotics have always been at kind of that university level, but it's great to see that sixth form sort of level using robotics now. So yeah, we support with education packages, training materials, online learning resources. We have an online learning academy that actually anybody can log on to and try on our website, because you know a key factor is that actually automation's got to play a larger part of the kids of today. It's got to play a larger part of their future, because they're going to have all us old people to support when we're getting on.
Very true. Michael, what about KUKA? What do they get?
Definitely, we're heavily invested in sort of training and onboarding young people. We're fully embedded with a lot of the major universities that are kind of specializing in these areas. And like I think all of us would agree, robots have a very trendy image, and it's almost easy to get people interested in the robots. So young person coming out of school, college, university, whatever, yes, robotics looks like a really attractive career because the robots are quote unquote looking pretty cool. Ironically though, once you've been in the industry for 10, 15 years, you get bored of the robots and you start more interested in what they're doing. I walk into a factory, wow, look at the feeding system, look at the gripper it's got. I don't even look at the robot anymore. But yes, it's definitely similar to what Paul was saying. We also have online resources for learning. We've got a training academy in the UK. We want to do everything we can to help people get into the industry, because it is a brilliant one to be in. And for any budding robot programmers out there, you know, it's a good career. It pays fairly well if you get good at it. And yeah, I'd highly recommend being in part of it.
Excellent. Well, one question before we wrap up, which I did promise I'd cover, was how can large companies help their SME suppliers? I mean, we mentioned Sainsbury's earlier on. I mean, there are other supermarkets are available, but how can and should and perhaps do those companies help SMEs with becoming more automated? Do they have little clusters, for example, that they work together so that SMEs can benefit from technologies in larger companies, or is this just not done?
I think they probably could be doing more. If we look at supermarkets and food and beverage supply chain specifically, a lot of the hesitation initially prior to this kind of boom in automation, a lot of the hesitation was that they were being offered, or the SMEs were being offered, very short-term contracts. So they might be supplying loaves of bread for the next year, but beyond that, they didn't know if they'd be supplying those loaves of bread anymore. And it was very difficult to make an investment in a machine that's, you know, maybe 18 months, 2 years payback when they can only see the contract length 12 months. So certainly looking at the commercial aspects with their supply chain to say, hey, look, we understand that you need to invest in automation to be a better supplier to us, to be a more robust supplier to us. And as to help you do that, we're going to introduce you to some of our contacts, because we speak to a lot of the supermarkets, and they are very keen for automation in their supply chain. Yeah, it's got to be this kind of two-way street. We need you to invest in your automation supplier, so we're going to help you in these kind of ways.
Is that something you see happening, Paul, or not?
Not a massive amount. I think there's definitely there's merit in knowledge sharing with the supply chain, and sort of helping and sharing the load from that perspective. But also you can sometimes see a lot more innovation sometimes in the agile SME than you can sometimes see in the big slow corporate organization as well. So sometimes it could run up the pole as well as down, really.
Excellent. Yeah, very good point. Nikesh, anything to add on that one?
No, just collaboration point, really. I mean, as associations, we work, we have both sides of this spectrum in the same room at the same time. And I think, I used to work in industry, and coming to those meetings, I now found it fascinating to see, the SMEs can learn from multinationals. But then, as Paul mentioned, the multinationals can also learn just as much from the SME. So within those conversations, it really does form a best practice, a best voice, a larger voice of the industry. So yeah, the collaborative networks, opportunities, associations like ours, Knowledge Transfer Network, the MTC, all these businesses, they're all helping to encourage this sort of collaborative behavior. So yeah, just the help is out there and around you, really.
What you can often see, particularly with those larger organizations that might be maybe draining the labor pool from some of the SMEs, is there is more sort of innovation within the SME market, because it's being forced on them, and sometimes the larger companies obviously can pay a little bit more at times and suck up that resource.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting towards the end then. So before I ask you the classic question of, if we hold this conversation in 5 years' time, what do you think the biggest differences will be? I'll just tidy up a couple of comments in the chat, which I don't think we need to discuss too much. Martin points out that the robotics standards refer to robots designed for collaborative robot applications. So it's kind of blurring the difference, I suppose, to a degree. And a robot is part of the application, lots of options. So just making that point. And also there's a question about how does the UK's productivity compare with the other G7 countries? And rather interestingly, it says the UK came fourth highest out of the G7 countries. Well, my maths isn't that great, but that probably suggests they're absolutely in the middle. So perhaps it's a glass half full or glass half empty type of question. Of course, we should aspire to be top, but we're not bottom either. So perhaps we should be optimistic on that basis. Okay, Nikesh, if we hold this in 5 years' time, which we probably will, what do you think will be different?
A lot of hope. I hope to not be having the same conversation in 5 years' time, and hope that we've reached a point where we're talking about the next stage and how all the investment that's been done in UK robotics and manufacturing in the past 5 years is now being developed, and where we can use it and how we can work alongside it, and with a better skilled workforce and better collaboration with experts. So yeah, really and truly, I would like to not be having the same conversation, but a developed version of the type.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. Michael, what would you say?
Well, certainly, I think that as more and more applications are installed in the UK, we get more case studies, more reference sites, and it kind of will give a snowballing effect. So if somebody's in the UK thinking about doing something, they think like they're the first company trying to do it, we can tell them, actually, it's not that low risk, because we've got this other company down the road we can show you that have done something very similar. And it can start to give confidence to the UK that robots and automation are important investments for SMEs. So that's really what I'm hoping for, is to kind of change this culture in the next 5 years, that that it's not risky. It's not something you shouldn't be doing. It's definitely something that you should have done a long time ago.
And a build up of confidence, which we all would welcome. Paul, final word.
Yeah, so more, obviously, in that time, more robots will be deployed, more standardized solutions will be available, which will just, hopefully perpetuate that circle in the right way, really. So that's what I'm expecting. There'll be, always advancements, whether it be in software or hardware, just to make more things achievable for companies, really.
Lovely. Okay, well, it's an optimistic note, but we don't see revolutions. We see evolutions to a better place. So with that in mind, thank you very much to the three of you for your contributions today, and to everyone who has attended for attending and in many cases contributing and putting in some additional useful information into the chat. So thank you all for that. We seem to take a longer holiday than the MPs do this year. So the next Talking Industry, I think, is in September. So we will look forward to seeing you all then. And thank you very much indeed to everybody. Thank you.